right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Politics and Pints here on Jackman Radio. I'm one half of Jackman Radio, Eric Jackman. Very happy to be with you today. Thank you for tuning in. And I have a very special and unique guest joining me today, I believe from California, Miss Préity Üupala. She's a Dharma ambassador. She's an actress, an author, a researcher, a journalist. I mean, she does a lot of different things. So, Préity, thank you for joining me today.
Namaste, everyone, and namaste, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It's always an honor to speak to people on the political spectrum who have all sorts of interesting views, and to see maybe where we converge, and when we look at the global landscape, where we are at, because we are going through a massive churn, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love connecting with people from all stripes. And I know before we were rolling here, we were talking about, you were kind of wondering what my political leanings were and where I am on the spectrum. And you're absolutely right. I'm kind of, I try to be pretty rational and reasonable about it. And I think the extremes on both sides of the spectrum have gone off way too far. And, oftentimes that puts off your everyday average person and a lot of younger people like millennials my age from wanting to get involved in politics. So,
true.
Yeah. So you're in Beverly Hills? Is that where you're located? Are you quarantining in Beverly Hills?
Well, look, I think the lucky thing about lockdown in California is it's beautiful. It's perfect weather every day. It's sunny, and we have a lot of space, and people are allowed to drive and walk around wherever they want, and all the shops are open, but takeaway is there, and the stores are open. You can go and get things, and some beaches are closed, but some parks are open, or around the park is open. So you can find some picnic spots. I've been doing a lot of picnics and driving up to Malibu and all that good stuff, and good time to get away as well for like a short trip. So I am very productive. This has been actually a godsend for me, because I'm writing a book, and it actually gave me the space and time to just, get myself very disciplined and get on with my book. Because before that, it was just, I wasn't giving it the time that it needed. So it's worked out quite karmically perfect for myself, let's say.
Yeah, no, that's there couldn't be a better time to be writing a book. I mean, with everything. Now, is that the book you're working on? Is that called The Eternal Gift?
That's a good question. The Eternal book was a book that I started last year, but this particular book, I'm doing a treatment for it, and it's I think you'll enjoy. You'll be fascinated. It's actually on feminism, but it's looking at the journey of feminism and actually taking quite a critical view of it, of what it's morphed into. Because I think people don't want to touch the subject, but there is a lot to touch, let's say, and I'm going to go there. So, and I think you need, like if some white dude wrote this book, they would butcher him. And I think coming from a young woman, especially myself, I probably tick all the intersectional boxes, even though I hate identity politics. I mean, it does. You gotta, use it or lose it, baby. You gotta make it work for you sometimes. I think it's going to be a fascinating read.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. So, what is your perspective on feminism? What does feminism mean to you?
Real feminism is about your feminine essence, and feminine essence is about sensuality. It's about softness. It's about vulnerability, openness. What makes a woman, and has for thousands of years. You look at the feminist activists today, that is not what they portray at all. It's the opposite of that. So I'm afraid that it's morphing into something quite unpalatable to men and women, and also they're hijacking a lot of kind of political and social scenarios, let's say. And I think they're weaponizing victimhood, and the whole feminism is being weaponized, let's say. And I don't think it's healthy for our future. I think I know a lot of young men and boys are just not able to be the man that we all want them to be. And there's so much talk about toxic masculinity, but there is such a thing as masculinity too, which is beautiful and needed, and you need it for the yin-yang balance, or the Shiva Shakti, as I like to say, which is, it's the dance between the male and the female, you know. That's a beautiful dance. And I touch on ancient traditions, which don't have this problem. And they actually dance with each other quite nicely, and they are just a reflection of the other. One isn't better than the other, right? They sort of marry in. And that's what yoga really is. It's the union of male, female, yourself and the divine, all of that good stuff. So I'm coming at it from a very, very holistic, nuanced perspective. So, yeah.
Well, that is awesome. I'll certainly like to read that when that comes out, because I really believe
Yes.
we need a more nuanced and balanced approach to the sexes. I mean, and that's the thing. You have a crowd who doesn't even want to acknowledge that there are differences between men and women. And then you have the crowd that can go too far in one way, saying, you know, a man or a woman is superior to the other. And I really like what you said there, that we are really equal in many ways, and we are different in many ways.
Yeah.
And we have to, you know, be honest about the reality of that. And, you know, I was lucky and privileged enough to grow up with my father. I had him for 30 years. He unfortunately passed away 3 years ago from brain cancer. But he embodied great masculinity, you know, in that he was a very caring person. He was a very thoughtful person. But also the physicality of a man. He was a contractor. He sold cars. He was a mechanic. He could build houses. He could sew. He could do electrical work. You name it, the guy could do anything. And he was a hockey player. He was from Canada originally.
Wow.
Yeah, he's from Newfoundland, out in the ocean.
So you're half Canadian.
Yeah. My dad was. Yep. My dad was born in Newfoundland and actually immigrated to Ventura, California in 1965 when he was 10 years old. So hockey was a big part of me growing up, that real masculine energy and sport. And that energy, my dad helped me channel that towards hockey and something productive and not destructive. So there certainly is, there's toxic masculinity, and then there's good masculinity. And, you know, my dad said a good...
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
Yeah, so he set a good example for that, and I certainly believe, you know, it can go, feminism and uber masculinity can go into the extreme for both men and women. So we have to always find that balance.
That's true. I think the narrative is that people aren't willing to agree that they are extremes. They say, no, the extreme is only on the male side. But we've seen, I think, the Me Too movement, the Time's Up, what's going on right now as well. And I mean, I don't know what your take on Biden is, but you know, where are all the Brett Kavanaugh people? You know, I mean, come on, talk about hypocrisy. I think the far left just keeps eating itself. You know, they're like champions of self goals, right? I mean, they don't even need a Trump. They just do it all by themselves. And as an outsider, I just observe, and I think, and the left or the far left in every country is the same. India is no different, trust me, or Australia is no different either. And it's just all shades of like you know, madness, I think, and absurdity. And it's like a soap opera. You just kind of watch the whole thing unfold. It's like a live car crash waiting to happen. Yeah, but I just hope that they don't. They've already taken over mainstream media and academia, and I don't want them to sort of permeate through even more facets of society, because kids are very impressionable, and you see a lot of university students come out with a very different view of life than what really is. They live in some kind of delusional utopia that doesn't exist. And it's very dangerous, because the big bad world out there is not like that, and it leads you up, or it'll push you to one extreme, and then you end up becoming the very people that you despise. And I see it happening, right, with all this campus violence and deplatforming and all that stuff. And political. I mean, I'm waiting for the civil unrest to unravel, because it will. I think that day is not far off. You know?
Yeah, well, you asked where are all of the Kavanaugh people, and most of them are trying to become Biden's running mate. That's That's where they are. You got your Klobuchar, your Kamala Harris, your Liz Warren, your Kirsten Gillibrand. They were all pants on fire when it was Kavanaugh, but now that there's a credible source of alleging sexual assault on Tara Reade's account against Biden, you hear crickets.
That's true. It's very
So,
sad. But I'm a great believer in karma, and I think that ultimately the truth triumphs, especially in these political scenarios. It always ends up working out in that way. So I think we just have to be patient, and time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly find her allegations to be credible. I mean, my take on it is, if I were a woman and I knew that I was going to come out in this day and age, and I was on social media and I became a public figure, why would you put yourself in that position to take on so much scorn and ridicule and attack if it wasn't true what you were saying?
That's true.
So, and knowing how power works, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, powerful men, that's like as old as time. The tales of abuse and being corrupt, and shaming their victims and not allowing them to come forward. I mean, that's how the game has worked for so long in Washington and around the world. I'm sure you could speak to it with India, but power, that's how power is. And at the end of the day, it is just people. So people need to be held accountable. And just because you're rich and powerful doesn't mean you should be beyond accountability.
That's true. I mean, bigotry, racism, discrimination, harassment, abuse happens around the world on all levels of society, in every industry, has been forever and will be forever too. That's just human nature manifest. And to just pick and choose is very dangerous, or to pretend that it doesn't exist, or to pretend that that's all that there is, and you're going to live your whole life with this huge kind of burden, and not even try to be better, or maybe what happened to your ancestors. Hey, genocide has happened to every race out there, right? It's nobody's domain, and everyone's been persecuted. And you just get up and brush it off, and you try your best, and you try to be a good human being, and fulfill your purpose in life, and you do the best that you can with the cards that you're dealt. But I'm seeing way too much victimhood, and it's a lot of it's just interesting, their idea of persecution. It's kind of very perceived, or their sort of value, kind of judging it in a way and saying my persecution is better than yours, and my victimhood is better than yours. And this is another line from the left playbook, which really is very irksome, because then you're actually denying legitimate, abuse or harassment that happens on to the other side. You want to pretend that no, that they're not abused, or they don't have feelings. They're also not human. That they also don't go through the same crap that you probably do. You got to find the middle ground, if anything. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people like to dehumanize other people and their perceived opponents, and divide and conquer, and put ourselves on teams and go against each other. And like I was saying to you before we were rolling here, that's very much what drew me to Tulsi Gabbard's 2020 campaign, and why I got on board with her so early and was one of her biggest people here in New Hampshire, was really her posture and her willingness to talk to people you don't agree with, kind of like the old days, as a human being, as someone. Just because we don't agree doesn't mean we can't be friends and get along and work together to find some common ground. So here in New Hampshire, I mean, we saw people who were Trump supporters, independents, progressives, libertarian type people, very pro-military people were coming to Tulsi's events just simply because they wanted to know more, and they were very attracted to someone like that. So when did you first hear about Tulsi Gabbard?
I had heard about, so it's interesting. When I heard about her years ago. I think I saw a photo of her, and I thought she was an Indian woman, because she looks very Indian. And her name is obviously, it's very Indian, right? And I just thought, okay, this is a very beautiful, composed Indian woman. I like her. I want to back her, whatever her journey ends up being. And then I think I looked her up maybe when Joe Rogan and them were talking about it, and then I realized she's not Indian. She's American Samoan, but she just looks very Indian, which is great. But she's a Hindu, and I'm a Hindu too, a very proud one. So I just thought that she was incredible because, especially from that, from the religious aspect, I don't think we have representation in this country. Now, the sort of Hindu American population is what, 3 million, I think, or maybe a little bit more than that in America. And they happen to be the most educated and wealthiest ethnic group because the Indian Americans are, but 85% of that group are Hindus anyway. So we have so much influence and we've done so well for ourselves and been model citizens for decades, right? And contribute. And, every seventh doctor in America is Indian. And yet we don't have clout in the political sphere. We don't have clout with policy. We do have people running and winning, which is great, but they don't necessarily bring issues that are resonant with the community. They're just people who happen to be Indian, let's say, and run and win. And ironically, they win on a minority card, but they don't actually put forward the minority issues, which is really, really sad. And that's happening today. But she was one who openly spoke about religious bigotry in this country and the double standards that happen within faiths, in not just here, but around the world, where some faiths are deemed as more persecuted than others, when the history will tell you something very different. I would say that Hindus as a people, I mean, obviously Hindu civilization is the oldest and unbroken continuing one in the world, but they're also one of the most persecuted, if not the most, the most genocided. And we talk about Jewish people and their atrocities. I mean, we've had equal things like that. I mean, Churchill alone did much similar damage, and nobody wants to touch that. So we are a group that has been persecuted and whatnot for thousands of years, but we don't play victimhood very well. We don't talk about it. I think it's a great saying. Hinduism doesn't do well with victimhood. If you want to be a victim, find another faith, which is so true. Because if we just brush it off and we've come with nothing, and look, we are the CEOs of the top companies in America today. But politically, we're too busy winning spelling bee tests and becoming professors and doctors, and we forget. And then we look at the policy; it's very antagonistic, and there's all kinds of lies being peddled. And she was a great representation, I think, or an example of the kind of anti-India or the anti-Hindu, I think, bias that exists very subversively. I don't want to say pan-America, but definitely in certain sections of the political spectrum. And it was really disgusting to watch when you think, are you seriously criticizing this and not this stuff, which is much worse and quite a threat to our humanity, as per se. So she was great to highlight all of that. I think she's a brave woman. She was proud of her faith, let's say, and because you can be very subtle about it, and I mean, look at Nikki Haley, right? She's Indian. She was a Sikh. I think she's kind of half Christian, half Sikh now. She's proud of her roots, but she doesn't sort of. That's not her main thing, She doesn't go on about it. But I think Tulsi really. We needed someone, I think, to speak to the faith at large, and she did that, and we loved her for it. I believe in divine timing. I think that she has a long career ahead of her, no matter what she decides to do. And when she announced that she was running, I just thought that's too soon. I thought 2024 would have been the time for her to just jump at it. But then on the other hand, I think maybe it was karmic that somebody had to step up on the scene and talk about the issues that she did. Whether it was the anti-war thing or the bigotry or being proud of patriotism and military and things that are so American, and one should be so proud of it. Like, she is a nationalist, and I like that about her. And she was also someone, I think, who could cross aisles easily, and we can't say that about most people, especially on the left, right? So for those reasons, I thought she was very important. I don't see anything as good or bad. I think in life, I think everything's meant to be. It's perfectly orchestrated. It's divinely beautiful. Her karma will unfold as it does, and I just want to see her go to the heights of success and happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that was something that was refreshing about Tulsi. I mean, obviously, her Hindu faith is very important to her. It's a big part of her identity, but she's also very accommodating and welcoming of people of other faiths, and also people who don't have faith. So I'm personally an atheist. I
Oh,
don't have any faith. I don't have a church or a religion or anything like that. And in my younger years, I used to be a lot more of like a militant atheist, and really
wow.
like
Yeah, you
big.
don't want that because that becomes a religion on its own. It's
Well, that was going to
scary.
be exactly my point. Really, I was really big into Richard Dawkins
I
and
was going to
Christopher.
say Richard Dawkins. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then you found Sam Harris.
right. Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. And they have a lot of great things to say, but you're exactly right. It becomes a church of non-belief. It becomes a cult of non-belief. And
Yeah.
then you are now boxing yourself into becoming the very thing that you purport to be against.
Yes.
So I don't have the answers. I don't know one way or the other if there's a God or if there's not a God, or what's going on out there. But I think certainly it pays to be as accommodating and respectful as possible to other.
Open
Yeah,
and tolerant.
open and so you want that respect to be paid to you, and you want to be able to pay that to other people.
Yeah.
So being an atheist, I can talk to anybody. No one is out of the conversation,
Yeah.
or beyond talking to. And actually, during the campaign, Tulsi liked to try to get to a church every Sunday if she could.
Wow.
And I was able to connect her with a local church here in New Hampshire that's like a very conservative, socially conservative, evangelical Christian type place. And my connection to it was a personal connection. A friend of mine who I grew up with, he's from a Finnish family from Finland. We have a lot of Finns in this area. And we grew up together, and he served in the Marine Corps, so he really liked Tulsi's military service. And I got her the invite to the church, and I accompanied her to a church. I guess you could call it service there for a couple hours, and it was interesting.
Wow.
So you have an atheist sitting next to the first Hindu member of Congress at a evangelical church. But that's what's so cool about Tulsi is she's really cool with everybody, and even if you don't agree or you're from a different faith or no faith, she's very warm and open. So that's a sign of a real leader in my view.
It is, and also it reflects Hinduism itself, because Hinduism is like that. We have, you can be an atheist and still call yourself a Hindu. There's a percentage of, it's an actual sect. It's not just atheist in name only. You can reject the Vedas, you can reject the concept of God and the concept of spirit, and still be proud of your, I guess, Hindu heritage or the values that Hinduism stands for, things like ahimsa and karma, dharma, artha, moksha, all those wonderful things that are, these are universal sort of principles. For me, religion, I sort of break it up into two. I have Abrahamic religions on the one hand, and then I call them karmic faiths, and those are Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. And of course, you could have Zoroastrianism and Baha'i there as well, I guess. But they are not. It's not dogmatic. It's not. There's no prophet. There's no book. There's no like God or messenger as such. It's just traditions, a set of traditions. It's a sort of ancient wisdom, really spiritual technology. And the difference between them is, with the Abrahamic religions, what they lack is mutual respect. They will give you secularism. You are obviously allowed to to practice whatever faith you like, and there is separation of church and state. But what you don't find is a genuine acceptance, respect, and acknowledgement that the other person has a different path, and it may be a path that's different to yours, but it's theirs, and it's their prerogative to walk on that path. And this whole proselytization, we don't have conversions in Hinduism or Buddhism or Jainism. Nobody, that's not, we also don't have apostates, because nobody sort of comes and leaves in that way. You could, but certainly there's no death penalty for it. But that's a big difference, that mutual respect, and also the exclusivist mentality that there's only one God, one book, and one prophet, and if you don't believe in him, you're gonna hell. That's not the idea that I grew up with, and that's a big difference between. And you look at India, it's like 1.3 billion people, every religion under the sun, so diverse, 1,000 languages. Why are they? I would really say very, very peaceful and harmonious for the most part. They have for thousands of years because of the Hindu ethos, which is, acceptance, plurality, tolerance, and all those things. That's the very fabric. But we're seeing that being attacked in so many ways, which is really perverse and sinister, I think, from the naysayers, let's say, or people who have an agenda. So we'll get into that maybe later, but yeah, just to share with you my thoughts on religion.
Yeah, no, that's great. And growing up, a lot of my early exposure to India and Krishna and that was George Harrison's music.
Oh yeah,
He's my
Beatles.
favorite Beatle, and my dad played me the Beatles when I was like 10 years old. And some of the first songs I remember were like Norwegian Wood and Across the Universe that had the sitar in it. And I'm like, wow, what is that instrument? And then that led me to
Yeah.
Ravi Shankar. And that was those are my earliest memories of anything having to do with India.
I think that's for many Americans. And I mean, when you look at this hippie movement, what was that? That was people that were done with the war. They were tired of everything wrong in this country, and they just wanted a better way. And then came Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and Yogananda, and the spiritual gurus started coming in. And you have Beatles and several other people who sort of found that truth, I guess. And then this hippie movement was people essentially kind of looking east and kind of almost like quasi semi-Hindu almost, with kirtan and vegetarianism and the music, meditation, yoga,
Yeah.
and all that good stuff.
Right, and I think out of the four Beatles, George was really the one who took to it the most and really stuck to it for the rest of his life.
He was
After the
sincere. He was a real seeker, yeah.
Yeah, real seeker, and obviously Ravi Shankar was like a father figure to him, and I feel George probably did a good job of representing that
Yeah,
faith and that movement. Do you
I
feel like
think
he did?
he did. And also, speaking of Ravi Shankar, I had the great privilege of going to his last concert, which happened, I think, in November 2013, I believe. I was actually it was a newspaper that contacted me and said, would you like to interview Ravi Shankar? He's 93 and he's doing a show in Long Beach. And I said yes. So I interviewed him, and
Oh,
I had the
cool.
interview. And then he said, would you like to, have you ever seen me? I said, no. He said, I'd like to give you 2 free tickets. Please come and watch the show.
Oh,
And I
cool.
did with a friend. We went to Long Beach. We watched this. This guy's 93, and he's having a kind of a nirvana experience on stage. And because I asked him these questions, I said, what's going on stage? He said, I don't know. Something takes over. All I am is present. I'm having a spiritual experience on stage. And I just thought he was so connected to the divine. And then I went to his show, and then in December, the very next month, he passed away. So I might have been the last person to interview him, and that was his last concert. So I'm very blessed.
Wow.
Because
Wow, that's awesome.
I've never gone to see him.
Yeah, he and his daughter performed a lot of Indian music for the concert for George on the anniversary of George's
Wow.
death at Royal Albert Hall in London. And that's the first half of the concert is just a lot of that Indian music and sitar that George really enjoyed and was really big on while he was alive. So yeah, I think that stuff's beautiful. And it's I also like George's tying in of Krishna and all that, really rejecting materialism. And he had the song "Living in the Material World." And I'm not a very materialistic person. I have somewhat of a minimalist approach to life. I don't like to have a lot of clutter around me and a lot of junk or just stuff that if you have it around you, it just takes up your energy and your attention and you're worrying about it. So I think the less you own, the more clear-minded you can be. You
That's
know what
so
I mean?
true. Well, it's all Maya anyway. I think we are we are so we're so consumed, and I think so attached to the Maya, the illusion, the illusory world, but it's not real. It's all Maya, and it's not here to stay. And this is a Leela, it's a divine play. We're just actors playing a part, and we'll say our lines and we'll play our bit, and that's it. We exit stage right, that's life. And the beauty of looking at life that way is, don't get attached to anything, be present. The only thing available or important is the present moment. Nothing else actually exists, right? It's just that breath. The breath is all you have, the pranayam, and you just try to be truth within each breath, and then you're good.
Yeah, well, this idea that we're just pure consciousness inside of a physical suit, our bodies, and yeah, it's just a passing moment, a fleeting moment, and the real important things, at least my takeaway being here on Earth for 33 years, the most important things to me are my family and my friends, and seeing them and being with them and spending real quality time and having deep conversations and doing meaningful things with them. So to me, that's it. I mean, that's love to me, and that's one of the things that keeps me going, especially during this whole virus deal.
Oh wow, yeah, and the virus and the political spectrum too. So much venom and toxicity, and you have to just know that all there is love. That's the only thing real. Everything is just, it's not real, and people are getting attached to what's not real, and more so than ever, I think. But I think this, in some way, this virus is a paradigm shift. It is transformational. People, whatever was not real, especially in Hollywood and LA, I think people were living very inauthentic lives. They're just kind of busy doing nothing and running around chasing their tail. And this virus actually forces them to stop that cycle, and they're forced to just be with them, ask themselves, who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? And for the first time maybe ever, they're contemplating about their reason for being, and all these essential questions of their existence. And I think when the lockdown finally gets unlifted, I think people will be mellow, and I just feel that there is going to be some real, genuine shift in people's vibrations and consciousness. It has to, and I think the industry will change forever. And I don't want to see the Beverly Hills Housewives again. I don't want to see all that crap reality show, man. Life is too short for all of that. I mean, if one thing good about this this COVID is, nobody cares about them. Nobody cares about celebrities and these people that we put up on a pedestal who honestly don't affect us in it. They're so inconsequential. Or I would even say that about athletes, or all these famous people.
Yeah.
I mean, what are they to you?
Well, we're finding out in society who we're all standing on the backs of, and those are our healthcare workers, those are nurses, doctors, grocery store clerks, people who work in the food services, people who work in meat processing, farmers, pickers.
Delivery, Amazon, transport.
Oh, Jesus. Right. Those are the people we should worship and build stadiums for, not, like you said, these vapid actors and actresses and millionaire athletes who get paid millions of dollars to play a child's game, So you're right. It's a chance to really pause and slow things down, which I think is great, and to take a look and take inventory of what is actually important during our existence. And those things that we've had beat into our brains since day one, from Hollywood and the media and sports and whatever else industry, that doesn't really mean anything. It's just clutter of the mind and nonsense and meaningless. And I've certainly relished in that ability to do a pause and take a breather and really take inventory of what's important.
Absolutely. I'm just excited. I can't wait to travel because I speak a lot around the world, and I had so many speaking gigs that got kind of postponed. So I can't wait to travel again and to go to these fundraisers and events that I was speaking at, because they were all so amazing. And but I've also made incredible connections, and I've used this time so wisely. I'm doing every day I have a media interview or a podcast or something. But recently I got invited to speak, give lectures on politics and whatnot to thousands of students around the world. The last one I did had 10,000 kids tune in, and it was at 3:30 a.m. that I started my thing. It went for 2 hours.
That's amazing.
10,000. I mean, people are so hungry for political truth, of
Yeah.
our history, what's going on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And people are seeing too here in America how really flawed our system is. Our system was not ready for something like this, and it goes beyond a Democrat and a Republican lens. You can't look at it through
this is actually very good for kind of a wake-up call, I think, for this great country because it always goes on about it's the greatest country in the world and this and that. I mean, I would challenge that. I would say that it's got the best system in the world that is fair for anybody who's willing to work hard and do what it takes to become successful. And yes, freedom and independence are treasured here. I would leave it at that, because I mean, you can't really go on about talking about civilization because there is no civilization to talk about, and all of that great lineage, right? So it's very different what it offers. It's very important what it offers, but I think this shows that it was, number one, not ready, not prepared. And also, you look at geopolitics right now. I mean, they didn't step up. Who's holding? I mean, we know who let the dogs out, right? So nobody's holding anybody accountable. And I thought that the West was this great, moral police in the world that's going to put their foot down and really take action on the perpetrators. Well, that hasn't happened. In fact, it's all going to be huggy from now. I know, and even more business. More trade.
Préity, are you talking about those losers in China? the Wuhan lab and the Chinese, Préity?
It's so cute.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna be so strong. I've been so tough on China, okay, this whole time. Trump is the toughest president ever on China, okay? Everyone else were losers, quite frankly, okay?
Mr. President, yes, you said all the right things, but where's the action, baby?
Look, we're working on it, okay? All the politicians, they're all talk, no action. Trump, I'm all action all the time. Just ask Stormy Daniels, okay?
That's so. I don't think anybody wants to ask her. I mean, was she actually running? She wasn't running. No, her lawyer was. Oh my God, no, that's monstrous.
The creepy porn lawyer, Michael Avenatti, ended up in prison. Isn't that unbelievable? How's that for karma?
Where he belongs, yeah.
No, Stormy Daniels she was running for the Senate years ago in Louisiana, like 06 or 07, before the whole Trump thing. You know what? Most Americans don't really give a damn about Trump having an affair with her. People don't care about that.
No,
because that's what politicians do. They cheat on their wives. They have mistresses. They sleep with porn stars. They all do it.
We appoint people to run the country. What they do with their personal, or their body,
I don't care.
mind and soul. No, we don't. I would rather some foo-foo kind of, maybe questionable personal character, but really good on policy and economic and reforms and national security, than someone who is great with the other stuff, but terrible with running economies and bad foreign policy, and kind of the vision that they have is really dangerous. And there's a lot of politicians in that with that sort of narrative going on, and I think it's dangerous. I think people need to prioritize what they want in a leader, because nobody is perfect.
So
every leader around the world is flawed.
Oh, of course. So overall, what is your take on the king? Do you like Trump? What's your perspective on him? What do you like about him? What don't you like about him?
That's a great question. For me, see, I'm not just an American citizen looking at this from that point of view. I'm Indian. That's very important to me, and also my faith is very important to me, and also as a global citizen, right? I care about geopolitics. I care about what's going on in the Middle East and in Afghanistan and all that. So when I wear the hat of global citizen, Indian, or a geopolitical sort of analyst, I look at the president or him or any leader I have different criteria. These other things don't bother me. I care about, does he have the right briefings? Is he in line with the facts and the truth with what's really going on? And does he have good people around him and so on? So I think the Indian-US relation has been very antagonistic for the past, I would say, 70 years since independence, because the US, for some reason, has always kind of done things very antagonistic to its allies. For example, propping up military dictatorships in the region, and especially, I think, specifically with Pakistan, I think that's the big elephant in the room. They have funded it for decades, given billions in aid that never went to infrastructure development. It just went to their nuke program, and it went to their international terror factory or terror industry, let's say. And people don't realize is that Pakistan as a country, their whole economy is actually run on terrorism, and the military and their intelligence services actually runs it. And even their prime minister is just a puppet. So people don't know sort of the breakdown of the Pakistani state. And if they knew it, I think they would be very alarmed with foreign policy, US foreign policy in that region especially, and thinking that Pakistan was going to be this great ally in their fight against terrorism is such a joke, because they're the very ones who are actually funding and supporting the Taliban.
Right. If I could butt in quickly, they
Yeah.
came. The ISI came on my radar researching 9/11, and maybe you know this, that it's out there that the head of the ISI, Mahmoud Ahmed, in 2001 wire transferred $100,000 to one of the hijackers in 9/11.
They were trained. Number one, so Pakistan has a lot of ISIS, Al Qaeda, and Islamic terror training camps. This is known this is open. People in foreign policy knows this. The U.S. government knows this all too well. So these training camps are training the future Osamas. That's one thing. And then the second is, where was Osama being given refuge? It wasn't in Tehran. It wasn't in Moscow.
Right.
Although it was
Right.
not far from Islamabad. So you have to ask yourself, if they're giving refuge to and funding and training, they're not an ally. They're really the bad guy here.
Well,
And I think maybe Trump is the first one that has at least cut that funding and is, I think he's pressuring Imran Khan to take care of this little terror situation that they have going on, because it's not just India's problem. I think people think, oh, this is just India's problem. No, it's a problem for the world. This is the international jihad movement. This is the backbone of it. So you got to understand the makeup, I think, and then things are very clear.
So you think Imran Khan is just like an ISI puppet of the security state? He's not really his own man or his own leader?
I don't know. I don't think I know, because every single Pakistani prime minister, and also, by the way, the US also has a say, because the deep state will use Pakistan as a buffer. And sadly, against India, a rising, strong India is not what the deep state wants. It might be what the U.S. government wants, absolutely, and the leadership wants, but and the people, but not that, not those people, right? The ones that do want the wars and all that. They don't see India as an ally. They see them as some sort of competitive threat in some ways. So they want to use rogue states that are dispensable. Use them as they like, and that's why the funding comes. So I want to see more. I want to see a serious stop of the funding and some serious kind of ramifications of this terrorism has to stop. I mean, even during this crisis, in Afghanistan, sadly, has had multiple attacks. There was a Sikh mosque that got blown up. And then the latest was a maternity ward. Are you kidding me? Babies and mothers got blown up because they were Shia and not Sunni. I mean, this is the sort of this is the bad idea that we're dealing with. And I don't know what your thoughts about this Afghan deal is, but it is atrocious. It is a really horrific peace deal. It's not a peace deal at all. It's a sort of, you're signing off, you're destroying that whole region. Look, whether you have US troops or some troops, but you cannot leave a vacuum there, because the vacuum is going to be, there are hawks and vultures already around just waiting to take your place, and they're not going to be the good guys. So I think it's a very, very dangerous deal. I hope they renege on it. I hope they tear it up and come up with something else.
Yeah, well, I mean, that part of the world, and especially the Pakistan-Afghan border, it's always this dance between, the Taliban, the Afghan government, and then ISI, the Pakistani government. They just keep doing musical chairs, and it goes on and on and on. And the pretext for America being in Afghanistan was 9/11, which happened almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And there does have to come.
And before that, the Soviet Union too.
Right, and the Soviets were in there, and they couldn't get it done against in Afghanistan.
Everyone lost. Afghanistan is where you go to lose.
That's the killer of. It's called the killer of empire. You know.
It is. Yeah.
And I just feel so American lives have to be lost in Afghanistan, and trillions have to continue to be spent till what end? Like for how long? Indefinitely, forever? I mean, that's.
And they don't know who their enemy is. I think this is what I fear with this U.S. military. They don't know who their allies are. They don't know who their adversaries are. Quite honestly, recently I think they've abandoned their allies, and they're sort of in bed with their adversaries as all of this is unfolding. The Afghan government, the duly elected, the Ashraf Ghani government is very good, and I know a lot of Afghani people. They're wonderful people, and their leadership. Their NSA, who I met a lot of their people earlier in Delhi, where I spoke at this sort of global summit, and they had even the Iranian foreign minister was there. They had heads of state from everywhere, and we were able to sort of dine and chat with them. I was sitting next to the Russian ambassador and all that good stuff. But they're very good people that want to do the best, and their Afghani people have such great spirit, and their army is very capable. The problem is. The Afghan Taliban, propped up by the ISI and the Pakistani government and other players, don't let the Afghan government do their job in sort of resurrecting that, because that is a country that's very rich in all kinds of resources. It could be one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So, and also, don't forget, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why even Soviet Union and even the U.S. is there. I think people don't want to talk about it, but we all know what's going on there. The war is just a front.
Well, the war is the front for the international drug trade for heroin and the poppy fields.
Opium. Yep,
opioids.
absolutely.
80% of the heroin in the world comes from Afghanistan. In my small state of New Hampshire, we have a terrible epidemic of people dying from opioid addiction. And I tell people, chances are that opium came from Afghanistan. Who's in charge of Afghanistan right now? How does that heroin get out of the country and come here?
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And certainly, I mean, as far as who America's enemy is, it changes with the wind. We had Al-Qaeda that we had to be afraid of, and the Taliban, and now we're cutting deals with the Taliban. Now ISIS is our enemy. Behind a lot of that is Saudi Arabia, and that's another big thing that,
And other, I think people always, they always talk about the kingdom. There's other smaller, very rich Arab oil countries as well that
the Gulf states.
They fund it, but they're subversive about it. I think Saudi ends up being like this big sort of front for it, but there are other nations that I'd be more worried about. I must say I like MBS. I think for more ways than one. I think Israel-Saudi relationship has improved. India-Saudi relationship has improved. Suddenly, all these countries are really getting along. They need to. They cannot be adversaries, because I can tell you with the OIC countries, they have been very antagonistic towards, a country like India, for example, because it's not a Muslim country. But this is the first time where they're all unanimously they support India, they back India, they see India as an ally. We have 9 million Indians who work in the Gulf, and they like Modi, they like the government, which is a real change from what it used to be. It used to be really, really just sinister and bad policies, and kind of disliking them because they happen to be of a different religion. And if that has gone out the window, I think they're seeing India for the great power that it is, and they realize that they must work with India. And I think they genuinely like Modi, because all of these countries have given him this a lot of awards and stuff, and they don't just do that for anyone.
Yeah.
They didn't do that for other previous Indian prime ministers at all. None of them ever got any of these awards from the Arab world. So that's a big step.
Yeah, I mean MBS. He's a young guy. He's like my age, and I think they've worked pretty hard to like, create his image and like mold him as some reformer, and he's like a big liberal, and he's gonna open up Saudi Arabia, and women are gonna get rights. And
In some ways, because I have family over there. It's changed a lot. I mean, I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in all of these countries. It's very different today.
sure,
You know
it
what?
might it might be a little better, but they're still beheading people in the streets. Women are still being killed, and
but they do that in Pakistan too.
well,
They do that in Afghanistan.
of course, yeah.
That's not a Saudi problem. That's
No,
that's an Islamic issue. You know,
of course, but I mean, look, Saudi Arabia. I mean, right now,
that's Sharia law for you, and that's this
yeah.
kind of Wahhabism.
Wahhabis, yeah, the Wahhabist strain is especially dangerous and toxic.
It happens in Shia countries too. That's the thing. People think that it's only terrorism is the domain only of the Sunnis. Not true.
No.
Shias have both, and each other. There's a lot of intra-faith genocide and violence, which people don't want to talk about.
Sure. But my umbrage is, I'm sure you saw this in the news, another name came out who was part of the Saudi government who was involved with helping the hijackers on 9/11. So people within the Saudi Arabian royal family and the government played a greater role in making 9/11 happen. And that's being covered up because of the relationship we have with the kingdom. They have the oil. There's many, it's even beyond oil, but I'm friends with a lot of people who lost people on 9/11. I'm friends with survivors, and that's a tough pill to swallow if you're somebody who was in those towers and you lost people and you survived. And there's people in Saudi Arabia who are running free right now who were involved in the attacks.
Well, but the thing is that, so on September 11th, America found out about Islamic terrorism. India has known about it for 1,000 years. They've happened forever since the inception, because that's the violent part of this ideology, is that it's the jihad. It's in the name of the faith. It's okay to destroy life of the non-believer. They genuinely believe in this. And these jihadis, they're not like kind of hallucinating and conjuring up. They're reading stuff in a book that is their holy book, and they're enacting it. It's very clear. And I think sometimes what I've noticed in the West, and especially with the left, they want to kind of say that it has nothing to do with religion when it has everything to do with religion, because guess what? Other religions aren't doing it. I mean, they may all be flawed in some way, but it's not a part of the religion to, the kafir, which is a non-believer. I think with this ideology, they are the most hostile to them, and even the value of life of the non-believer is almost non-existent. That's why they can blow someone up and it's okay. They haven't done anything wrong because the person didn't have faith, So it's very dangerous ideology. And
well, a lot of religions can lean on their religion and their dogma to justify violence. I mean, every religion has that. You have Christian extremists who bomb and shoot up abortion clinics. You have, obviously, with Islamic terrorism, you have, I view what the IDF does to the Palestinians, I view that as terrorism. I mean, the way they treat the Palestinians and shoot children and to me, that's cold-blooded terrorism. So people use their religion for that. And as someone who doesn't have religion, I'm kind of able to step back and see that, and I like to call it out when it happens for all religions.
But then communism killed more people than all religions put together, and that wasn't a religion. That was an ideology.
Yeah, it was a stupid political ideology.
Political system, and a lot of people who love to criticize. Communists are very anti-religion, ironically, right? But they are more dangerous and violent in some ways than organized religions themselves. When you look at China and you look at different sort of communist regimes and the damage that they've done. For me, I think when you're Indian and a Hindu especially, all of this kind of terrorism is all too real. we've had many 9/11s, and for 1,000 years we've had lots of attacks based purely on religion that even, they don't talk about it in history books. And the world is only now starting to realize sort of, the trajectory and the sort of the manifestations of, I'm picking on this because, yes, I think other faiths have been, you look at the Crusades, but that was 2,000 years ago, and you look at the prevalent sort of kind of terrorism today, and it is one kind. And I think to lump other faiths as just as bad is very dangerous. And I see the left doing that, and actually they go further. They shield it, in the name of phobia. Now you can't even have these conversations that you're having because it would be deemed as being, phobic, when it's not. We're having very honest conversations that need to be had in our society today, because the problem is staring at us, and the more we stuff it underneath, the dragon that's going to emerge is worse. And this is also what causes xenophobia and real phobia. The real bigots come out because they've had it when you keep repressing and saying no, it's not, it's not them, and they're just poor brown people. I mean, there's such moronic comments that don't even make sense and aren't even factually true. And then it's that redneck is going to say, I don't like this, what is going on, Then the next time there's a church attack, I think he's going to pick up a gun and do something. So we're seeing this unfold.
Yeah. So what's your take on Vladimir Putin in Russia? What do you think Putin's after, and what do you think his ultimate goals are? I mean, I personally think that it's totally overblown in our media. They're the boogeyman right now. We have to blame all the world's problems on Russia, and of course, us Tulsi Gabbard supporters, we were called Russian assets. She's a Russian agent. Anyone who is perceived as wanting to have peace and get along with the second largest nuclear arsenal on planet Earth is called crazy and a Putin sympathizer. So from your perspective, how do you view Vladimir Putin, and how do you view Modi and Putin's relationship?
Very interesting. It's funny, when I was at that summit earlier this year, I took a photo with the Russian ambassador and I posted it, and I said, I guess I'm a Russian agent now. I mean, he was my dinner partner. We had a wonderful conversation about life and everything. And so the Soviet Union and India has a very, very special relationship. I think one thing that India has managed to do, which maybe no other country has, is it has independent alliances with many random players, and they may be adversarial to each other, but India is sort of friends with them all, or it's been non-aligned. It was the non-alignment movement, I guess. And it they didn't sign with NATO, but the Soviet Union also helped India a lot during our wars that we had. The US did not. In fact, the 71 war, which India won decisively, the Soviet Union supplied us with planes and everything that we needed. So I think we wouldn't have won many of the battles that we did without Russia's help. So there's a special spot in our heart. I think India as a civilization, as a country, certainly as a political fixture for Russia, and especially Soviet Union. They are not a threat to us, of course, and obviously China is a bigger adversary. We're not. I wouldn't say we're enemies. We have to have a good working relationship with China, but Russia and India obviously are closer. So Putin and Modi, I think they genuinely like and respect each other. I have nothing. I've been to Russia many times. I have no issues. I cringe when people say that they are the greatest threat, when I would say it's the rising imperialistic China and this Islamic terrorism. These are the greatest threats to humanity. It's not Moscow, And I think people need to really wake up and smell the coffee, because these things are, you can do some basic research and sort of find out what the bad ideas in the world and who's the good guy and the bad guy. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist, right?
Right.
And I think India and Russia is always going to have a good relationship. I think they should do more business. I think they should, in fact, maybe I don't know if India will and should play this role, but in some ways it's the only player that can be an intermediary between the US and Russia, and also the US and Iran, because we have a very good relationship with Iran. We always had for a long time, and even today. I think it irks me when people want to target Iran or Russia when there are other problems, other regions in the world that are far more problematic and where the real terrorism is coming from.
Yeah.
So I think they need to
Yeah.
get the foreign policy right.
Yeah, I hate them calling, building Russia as a boogeyman. I mean, my aunt's from Russia. My uncle married a Russian woman, and growing up as a hockey player, a lot of my favorite hockey players as a kid were all Russians, and they were all amazing hockey players. And that's where I'm a big believer in soft power and cultural exchange. And I want more of that. I want more of that with Iran. I want it with Russia. I want it with North Korea. Like I would be willing to go to North Korea dressed as Donald Trump if it stopped nuclear war.
You should do that. That would be such
Pretty, we are going to go over to North Korea. We're going to see Rocket Man. I'm going to bring him a Big Mac. I'm going to bring him a Big Mac because they don't have Big Macs in Pyongyang, I guess. But I'll bring him a Big Mac. We'll bring you over there. It'll be incredible. We'll show him some Bollywood movies.
Yes.
It'll be beautiful. we'll do a Bollywood dance with Rocket Man.
Cute. I think this will be the answer to world peace, is exactly what you suggested. I think we'll all win the Nobel Peace Prize if we take the Donald. Well, you really, right? Not the actual Donald. You and me. I'm going to do some Bhangra on the border or what.
We can do a dance.
But it's going to take that. It's going to take the soft power. It's going to take love. It's going to take spirituality. It's going to take food, dance culture.
Right.
Even when you look at Pakistan and India, I mean, I think in the last few years, because of so much incessant terrorism, we finally sort of put an end to that. But for 70 years almost, they are obsessed with Bollywood. They're obsessed with cricket. That was the one thing that was, I mean, it was a genuine rivalry, but also a genuine brotherhood, because I mean, we don't have an issue with them. I think they don't want to be us. They think that, we have a 6,000-year civilizational lineage. They have a 70-year-old history, and they don't want to be a part of that 6,000-year-old. And they say that, no, we came from elsewhere, when they didn't, So I think they need to, there's a lack of acceptance on their part of who they are. They have no identity, and we have a lot of identity. So,
I think I could get Modi and Imran Khan together in a room. I could have them laughing in about 20 seconds, okay? We'd have a great time. I'll put on some Beatles. I'll bring some great beer from New Hampshire, and we will have world peace so quickly. It will make your head spin.
Well, I think Modi is always laughing and smiling. I'm sure he's open for that. Imran Khan, maybe not so much. Did you know that he was a famous cricket player?
I did.
Like a star, man.
He was a rock star, yeah.
Indians loved him, and I loved him. He was one of my favorite players. And now I see this guy on the floor of the UN declaring jihad, and I think, what has happened? Is this the kind of world we live in? And I don't think it's from his soul. I think he's saying what he needs to say, but the fact that he is even saying these things and sort of demonizing India in the way that he does, when they are like the most dangerous country in the world, that he doesn't have a right to talk about anything, minorities, religion, blah, blah, blah. I mean, really talk about, hypocrisy here. It's just so sad that it's kind of degraded to this level. I mean, nobody actually takes them seriously, but there's a lot of venom there that was spewed, I think, sometimes. And it's like,
well, I really believe in the power of like personal connections among leaders. I mean, I absolutely loved when Donald Trump met with Kim Jong-un, and I loved when he went over to the DMZ and they walked across the border together. I shared it on social media and I said, a walk to remember, Préity. It was neat.
Did they hold hands?
I kind of wanted them to like hold hands, or maybe he could pick Rocket Man up and have him on his back. Look, I got my stepson Rocket Man for the day. Okay, we're doing a walk to remember. It's the greatest walk. It's the highest rated walk ever on network television. Okay, But
Totally.
I like when Trump does things like that. I like when he's outside the box and he essentially
Yes,
gives a middle finger to the foreign policy establishment of
yes,
DC, and he
yes,
pisses off everybody.
yeah.
And if I had Trump's position of power, his influence, I'd be doing a lot of those same things. So and that's what I love about Tulsi. She met with
Yes,
Bashar al-Assad. She went to Syria. She had the guts
yes,
to go over there and look at it for herself. She met with opposition. She met with Christians.
yeah,
She met with Assad and his people,
yeah,
and she got a clear view of it. And I tell people, I would give anything to have had a member of Congress go to Iraq
yeah.
leading up to the Iraq War in 2001 and take a look around before we actually decided to go over there and overthrow Saddam and then launch another regime change war and destroy Iraq and lose over 6,000 American lives, probably kill well over 1 million Iraqis, and destroy a country in an endless war.
Well, a leader is supposed to be a statesman. They're supposed to be diplomatic. They're supposed to listen to people, have
Mm-hmm.
conversations, bring people together. And how are you going to do that, unless you have dialogue? And I think she went over there with not just by, I think there were other people, or in
Mm-hmm.
the last several years, other American politicians have also gone to Syria and met with the same people that she did.
Mm-hmm.
So I think demonizing her just by association is horrible. Now, with Assad is one thing, but I think this demonization that comes from the left, with her sort of meeting with or associating with Prime Minister Modi, is a whole new level of moronic. Because here is a global leader that I think everybody respects, or most leaders respect, or so many American politicians have taken pictures with him. I mean, he's visited the States many times, and he's a rock star, and his people love him. And at the end of the day, whose opinion matters more? The Indian, whether it's the Indian farmer or the Indian billionaire, or the Indian American like myself, who knows what's been happening in India for the past 70 years, or this journalist in a air conditioned office in New York that has never been to India, does not speak the language, has no interest in Indian politics, but just wants to write a smear piece. And this is what's happening in Western media and in parts of let's say, parts of the left, let's say, just smearing for no reason, and there's nothing to back it up. And the evidence always overwhelmingly is opposite of that. Every time they make these claims, when you do the research, the research is the evidence is quite the other way around, and you find out, oh shit, he actually did a lot of good things. He has done more for minorities than the past administrations, for example, and all that good stuff, which people don't want to talk about. So it was just particularly offensive, and I think a bit despicable for me to see all of this play out, and they continue to do it with the Kashmir, with the 370, and all these things that the government has taken, steps that had to be taken, and they were taken in a democratic way. Huge everybody voted for it. Even the opposition leaders voted for it because this is the right thing for the country, and these things had to be done long time ago. And finally, they got done, and suddenly this is one step in the direction of human rights and even more secularism and even more protection and minority rights and so on. And yet the headlines are quite the opposite, and we can't do anything about it. All we can do is that they get tired and they just find something else to chase after.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know I was. It was entertaining. It was interesting to see Trump's reception in India. I mean, he went over
Oh
there.
wow, they love him over there.
Look, I went over to India, okay, and I had like 1 million people in the stadium for me. This thing was like 10 times bigger than the Beatles during Beatlemania. Okay, it was unbelievable. Modi was so nice. He said the nicest things about me. You could
He
really
did.
tell. You could really tell that the king and Modi, they love each other.
They do, but also remember, Modi is a genius politician. He regardless of what he feels in his heart. I mean, he's a smart guy. He's also a very spiritual guy. He knows right from wrong. Even if he doesn't agree with, character, personality, he knows that look, that Trump is a tool. He knows that, and he plays that very well. And he also realizes that the two countries need to get closer and work together. And
Sure.
because also tomorrow there may be a new president, and he has to do the same.
Yeah.
He will do that. Obama loved him, and
Mm-hmm.
he liked Obama too, right? So,
Right.
and I'm sure. Well, Bernie is a different story. I don't know your thoughts about Bernie, but I think some of his stances to do with this whole India and Kashmir was really just ain't gonna. I don't think so. I have
Yeah.
zero respect for him. I think he
Well,
was very misinformed, and he was pandering.
yeah.
I don't think he's one who panders, but he thought, oh, I want to get this vote, I want to get that vote, and you should never do that, because I think you hurt other constituencies, which is what happened in this case.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Bernie is right on about a lot of his domestic policies. I mean, I certainly want to see Medicare for all Americans. I want to see marijuana legalized. I would like to see the Federal Reserve audited. I'd like to see less government encroachment and, our government be better on civil liberties. But foreign policy-wise, I wasn't, and that's why I was with Tulsi, because Tulsi has a better grasp on foreign policy, not only in her own
Her strength was foreign policy.
Yeah, her grasp of foreign policy and her military experience and serving on the Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, meeting with world leaders, meeting with Modi, meeting with Assad. She had it over Bernie. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised about Bernie's foreign policy. I mean, he did vote against the Iraq War when he was in the House, which I give him credit for. That in my opinion, took a lot of guts and was not a very popular thing to do in America at that time. So he was right about that, in my opinion.
True, and but anyway, you can see if you follow the UK politics, same thing happened to Labour and Corbyn. I mean, they were overdoing it with all of this sort of identity crap, and the UK political system is very it's abrasive. I think they're like, you've got different minority groups that are actually very hostile to each other, and they're louder, and it's just more. I think Americans, I've always noticed, they are formal. They are sort of the puritanicals, and I like that. I just think they're more diplomatic. You go to UK, is like, wow, people there don't sugarcoat anything, and there's just more hostility. Maybe it's the weather, I don't know, but they're just more hard and rough, and there's a difference. And there, it's like there's nothing subversive in the UK. If there's an issue, it's in your face. Here, it's very kind of under the sheet. It's there, but no one wants to talk about. No one's, it's very interesting. And I think it totally backfired. And I hope that the DNC takes a cue, because they're going in that direction where they're sort of alienating certain groups. They're overdoing it to the others. They're choosing to ignore facts and some serious issues. And then you have all kinds of lawmakers coming in, introducing laws that are maybe not compatible to America and the American state, right? And the value system and all that, which I think is dangerous. I think you need to be careful who you elect. And I think this election and even the House and Senate, I think there's going to be a churn there for sure.
Yeah. So what's, I've done a lot of research into this. What's your take on Jeffrey Epstein?
Oh, okay, that's such a random question. Came out of nowhere. Look, I mean, these are bad guys. He's got guilty written all over him. I think people knew what he was. He knew what people were up to, more like. And I think the Hillary clan, let's say. I mean, I think clearly they weren't very impressed. I almost feel like he was about to disclose some stuff that would be incriminating, and he was taken out before that ever happened. Which means that the deep state has a very, very deep hands, and arms, because they govern places that you wouldn't expect that they would. I think it wasn't obviously not suicide. I think there was more to it, and we will never find out until maybe one day somebody writes a book, maybe. And nobody's really investigating it. I think they've moved on to, because of this virus, nobody's talking. The virus itself, there's so many conspiracies. I mean, there are people who don't even believe there's a virus. There are people who think it's a bioweapon. There are people who think it came out of disgusting eating habits. There are people who think the U.S. is behind it. They've funded these labs. So there's a multitude of different conspiracies. Yeah.
Right. Well, Epstein, I will say there are people researching it. Have you heard of Whitney Webb?
No, but I should look her up.
Check out Whitney Webb. Check out Jason Burmis, Last American Vagabond. They're all doing incredible research and
Wow.
work into Epstein, and they actually have been talking to a woman named Rhea Farmer, who was an Epstein victim, and she was the first victim to go to the FBI in 1996.
Wow.
So there's a lot more to that story, and it's definitely something I've been paying close attention to, and it really gets to the heart of power and the way power works in the United States. And Epstein had dirt and blackmail on the most powerful people in media, the most powerful people in government, military. I mean, he had a lot of people compromised. So there were a lot of people who wanted him dead. So I certainly, when he was arrested, I couldn't believe they arrested him. I couldn't even believe, like, finally he was arrested, and then when he turned up dead, it was like, okay, you know.
The deep state, yeah.
the deep state.
Or I mean, it's all one and the, it's kind of the peripheries, let's say, of the deep state. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you get to a point where you realize our government is just, really just it's mobs of criminals and gangsters and oligarchs who have some of the same interests and then have competing interests. And, the U.S. taxpayer and the average American person is not really aware of it. We're kind of fed our dose of the media, the narrative that's created and molded by the people who are guilty of the crimes, and they keep us dumbed down with sports and TV and media and reality TV and just a bunch of nonsense. So there are still a lot of people who read between the lines and do a lot of great research.
I wish that people, the masses, knew how the world actually works, whether it's world economies, or politics or real power, because it's a different game being played over there on that level. And I think citizens are innocent, they're naive, they trust, they really genuinely think, I'm going to vote for this guy, he's going to, even if that guy is good, what about his superior? And they just don't know how the great game of the world is being played and has been for thousands of years. It's always been like that. And it's only people at the top who, obviously, once you're in it, and then if you're at the very top, you are actually playing that game. It's very exciting, and the more, in my case, the more greater leaders I meet, and these high level events that I go to. I mean, you see everything. You see, I will share a Me Too sort of story with you. I mean, this is like a really high end event where all these foreign ministers around the world are all there, and we have a big gala dinner, whatever, I'm meeting and wining, dining with them, but they're all chatting to me and stuff. And then one of them was like, hey, let's go to the bar and, let's, can I get you a champagne? Or I said, okay. And I mean, okay, so if you're talking about life, politics, everything's 3 a.m., right? And I'm enjoying a champagne, everything's very respectful. And this guy just looks at me and says, do you want to, come over to my room? I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? This is like a foreign policy summit. We're trying to talk about wars and genocides here. And you're asking me to come to your room? I mean, I'm like, you're 3 times my age, man. You have grandkids. And also, this is India, or this is New Delhi. There is a cop standing outside. If I tell him what you just told me, he's not going to ask me questions. You will be arrested. Trust me. India is very tough on laws in that way. So, I mean, he took the chance to sort of even ask, post Me Too, like, are you serious? After everything after Weinstein and Epstein, like this. So it tells me that men are the same. They're never going to change. Human beings are the same. And in this game of politics and Hollywood, it's just people are completely taken over by power, sex and money. It's always going to be that. And drugs, too, if you want to throw that in there, right? So no matter, it's always going to be like that. And I think if you're a clean person like myself, I have to walk into these situations and just take the high road, do the right thing, but not be shocked, because that would be naive to think that suddenly we're living in a pure world. We won't be, and I shouldn't be disheartened either. This is a game. Play it as clean as I can, and do my dharma and do what I need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's well, I'm glad you got out of that situation. I'm sorry that happened. You know, I tell you, it must be very, very tough to be a very beautiful woman. I mean, I wouldn't know. You know, it must be very tough. It must be tough to be pretty, right?
I got to meet the Donald one day and ask him about Modi. I think that would be interesting.
Oh, that'd be great. Well, before we wrap up here, tell the viewers where they can find you, your website, social media. You know, how can people support you and find you?
Yes, thank you so much. So my book is coming out at some point this year. I will definitely keep everybody informed and let them know where they can find it. So you can find me in a variety of ways. I'm on Facebook. It's just my name, Préity Üupala. Twitter handle is Préity Üupala, but 2 U's, so it's Uupala. Instagram is Préity U. YouTube, I have my own channel. Just type my name in and my channel will come up. Please subscribe. I have tons of interviews and good content there. I write for like 20 different outlets. So you just Google my name and write journalist or articles or any specific Iran, Afghanistan, Kashmir, US, India, whatever, and hundreds, if not more, of articles will come up. I have my own radio show, The Eternal Hour, on iHeartRadio, and also the Préity Experience. But that's on YouTube. And I speak around the world, and I try to get content of footage of my talks and put them up as well. My website is being designed right now, but it will be PreittyÜupala.com. And just email me and just get in touch. I'll leave my email address if you like. It's MISSP.productions with an S at the end @gmail.com, and reach out. I'd love to hear from you guys, your take, questions if you have any, and I just like to engage. So I would be honored to hear from your fans.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been great having you on, and nice to connect with you. And you know, if you're ever out in New England, the Northeast, you want to come by New Hampshire, there's a great Indian restaurant in Manchester that Tulsi took me to.
Wow.
A few months ago, before this whole virus thing. I'd never had Indian food before. It was my first time, and really enjoyed it. It was really good.
Was it too spicy for you, or it was mild?
You know, I do okay with spicy food, but I didn't go like too spicy. But if you know, you have recommendations, I wouldn't rule anything out. But yeah, it's been great talking to you. So check Préity Üupala out on all of her social media and her YouTube, and it's been great talking to you. So cheers to you and everybody for watching. Thank you for watching Jackman Radio, and please hit that subscribe button. Check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/JackmanRadio, and we will be back with you again soon. So all of you stay safe, stay happy, and enjoy yourselves. Thank you very much.
Namaste. Thank you.